Okay, let's have sports talk. And today, let's talk about women's sports. I'm wearing my Clemson gear today in honor of Brie Clark. Brie Clark is the Clemson gymnast that is the first collegiate woman to ever hit the Biles 1 in NCAA competition. First woman ever. And she did this on February 28th. Such a big deal that Simone Biles gave her a shout out on social media about getting it done. Super excited for Brie. Only 5 women ever have hit the Biles 1. Simone Biles being one of them. So it's a huge deal for Brie and Clemson Gymnastics. Go Tigers. So let's talk about women's sports in that context. I was having a conversation in social media with a colleague around some issues around Title IX, and we were also talking about what's happening with the roster limits coming into play, and how that's potentially displacing people. But Title IX is where we'll land today. So as you know, okay, assuming that the NCAA settlement gets approved later in April, the Rev Share will come into play, $21.5 million. Under the previous administration, the Department of Education had issued guidance indicating that the Rev Share should be equitably distributed, okay, indicating that the Rev Share is considered athletic financial assistance, as that term might be used in Title IX, and therefore the Rev Share should be proportional. Now, the current administration has rolled back that guidance, and so the current, let me get his title right so I can look at my notes, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. Okay. He said in a press release that rolling back the Title IX requirements, that he's rolling back the Title IX requirements because, quote, Title IX says nothing about how revenue-generating athletics programs should allocate compensation among student athletes, end quote. At best, he's being Master the Obvious, since Title IX was enacted in 1972 and there was no revenue sharing component to athletes to talk about. At worst, it's just a blatant attempt to punk women. I'll let that sit. People feel various ways about Title IX on both sides of it. Feel however you want to about that, okay? That comment, though, is shady. Okay. Now, Dawn Staley, who's the highest paid coach in women's basketball, and rightly so, because she's killing it at the University of South Carolina, okay, calls the move a step backward. And so she has always been fighting for women's athletics, and she will continue to do so. She's built like that, okay? But let's use the University of South Carolina as a model to understand how the money is flowing in college sports, and basketball in particular. Now, Dawn Staley's team regularly sells out the arena for home games. They have won multiple years for having the highest attendance for women's basketball across all the NCAA. And they have a huge fan base. I mean, people love women's basketball at the University of South Carolina relative to the men who have not performed as well over time. So you would think that that women's basketball is profitable at the University of South Carolina, because how could it not be? Au contraire. Let's talk numbers and let's talk why. Okay, so men's basketball at University of South Carolina. Now these numbers were reported by the state. Okay, that's the newspaper in Columbia, so you can check your research. Okay, as of the end of fiscal 24, men's basketball had a $3.5 million surplus, and women's basketball had a $5.6 million deficit. How can that be? She's selling out the arena all the time. Okay, well, it's because the men earned $7.3 million in media rights and NCAA tournament distribution, and the women get zero. No distribution, no media rights. Zero. I said zero, right? Zero. Donut. That's changing in 2025, though. So now the women's basketball NCAA tournament will finally be financially rewarded. The differences between the men and the women is huge in terms of dollars and cents. So men's basketball earns an astonishing $8.8 billion with a B over 8 years. Women's basketball will be earning $65 million per tournament. So I'll do the math for you. Over 8 years, that's $520 million. $8.8 billion for men, $520 million for women. Okay? Now, I just told you they got a new deal in 2025. Prior to 2025, the women were getting $6.5 million in total across all women's basketball for the tournament. So the $65 million deal is a 10x improvement. Okay, but still $8.8 billion, $520 million. So what do we need to know about women's basketball? In 2024, the women's title game between University of South Carolina and Iowa had 18.7 million viewers. That is the highest number of viewers for any basketball game, period, in the last 5 years. Not women's basketball, not collegiate basketball, all basketball. All basketball, okay, in the last 5 years. Highest of any basketball broadcast, okay? And it was roughly 3 million more than the men had in their final game. So what are women to do? So women are starting to get a little traction on the NIL front. I have a couple of examples for you. They're anecdotes, but they're useful. Shalomi Sanders, Coach Prime's daughter, signed a deal with Savage X Fenty, Rihanna's brand. She's a brand ambassador for Savage X Fenty, and she has an equity stake. I love these women and these young men taking equity stakes in businesses. I love it. Okay, the way to do it. Good for her, right? She's crushing it. She already has deals with Oikos, KFC, and Dexcom. So Shalomi Sanders is doing all right. Now, another example. Texas Tech softball star Najari Kennedy. She just inked a multi-year deal with Easton softball. Easton softball, okay? So now she's getting paid. Now, interestingly, this same softball athlete, Najari Kennedy, received a $1 million collective deal to transfer from Stanford to Texas Tech. So she's getting paid. Okay. So, women's got a long way to go, and we got to figure out Title IX and all those things. But just wanted to give you a little bit of insight on what was happening with women's sports, particularly women's basketball. Let me know what you think. As always, let's talk about it. Peace.